Welcome to the Boomers, Bucks, and Bling podcast, where we turn retirement planning into a bit of a thrill ride. I'm your host, Carl Spiteri, and each week we'll dive into everything from reverse mortgages and staying put in style to Medicare, Social Security, and home safety. But wait, there's more. We're not just going to talk all about money and business. We're going to add some sparkle, some bling, as we chat with travel pros, party planners, and a lot of different topics that's going to help you make the most of your golden years. So grab a cup of tea or whatever it is you want to drink, get comfy, and let's make retirement planning an adventure of a lifetime.
Welcome to this week's edition of Boomers, Bucks, and Bling. I have Brad Hobson from Chicago Title, who's agreed to talk with us a little bit about title insurance. Now, that's not really a sexy, friendly, people just can't wait to talk about title insurance, but there's a few things that I think people that listen to this podcast might be interested in. So, Brad, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into title, how you doing? Do you have any retirement plans? You're probably in your early 60s, late 50s. Tell us a little bit about just your thoughts. Introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, well, Carl, thanks first of all for having me on the podcast. Excited to be here. Native San Diegan, went to San Diego State, and then right out of college, totally by accident, got into the title insurance business. I've been doing this for 38 years. I work for Chicago Title. We're a big, gigantic title insurance company. And I actually have fortunately done a pretty good job of planning for retirement. I've got a corporate gig, so I've had the opportunity over the years to invest in my company 401k. We have a deferred compensation plan that I've participated in. Own a couple pieces of real estate. So, and blessed to be living in San Diego, have a little place down in Mexico for fun. And it's been a great career, and it's still going strong.
So you piqued my interest there. Tell me a little bit about your place down in Mexico. What's that like?
Yeah, so it's just about 45 minutes south of the border here in San Diego. It's just south of Rosarito Beach, which is a very popular little beach town.
Mm-hmm.
It's a house in a community called Las Gaviotas, which is about 290 homes. It's a gated community right on the beach, and it's our little happy spot. Quite frankly, it's the beach house we could never afford in San Diego, but we bought it about 12 years ago, and go down there a couple times a month on the weekend, and it's a lot of fun, and it's actually very safe, and it's just really super relaxing for my wife and I.
One of these days, the name of this podcast is Boomers, Bucks, and Bling is dreams. It's whatever. Maybe I'll bring you back on sometime. We can just do a whole segment on Mexico and the pros and cons and ins and outs of being down there as much as you are.
Sure,
that'd be great.
Anytime.
Okay, great. We'll get it scheduled. So a couple of things that come to my mind when it comes to title insurance. So living trust, quit claim deeds, title insurance. So it's my opinion that most people should have a living trust. At the very least a will, but there should be some form of written engagement for what happens after, right? So tell us, so I bought a house 40 years ago, still living there, and I want to put my house into a living trust. I know an attorney can handle it for me, but tell me some of the pros and cons of that kind of mindset.
Yeah, no, it's a really valid point that a lot of people overlook. And I think if they're not thinking about putting a piece of property into a living trust, that they're risking some things. And from a perspective of sort of title insurance and how things pass along to heirs and things like that. So a living trust is a great way, a great facility to take a property that when people buy properties, if they don't have a living trust, they're typically taking title as joint tenants or tenants in common, married, sole and separate property, that sort of thing. But the next step is to put that asset, piece of real estate, into a living trust. So you start by, contacting an estate planning attorney and getting that done. A good estate planning attorney will create a living trust that you can put all your assets into. And you want to put, in my opinion, it's smart to put any real estate you own into the name of your living trust. It can be done by way of a quit claim deed, which is just a document that transfers title from the way you hold it now. So if it's Brad and Carrie, husband and wife as joint tenants, we're going to put it into the Brad and Carrie Living Trust. So it's just a document that your trust attorney can create it gets recorded, and now the property is in a living trust. So there's several advantages to that. The first being, you are going to avoid probate when you are deceased. So it's nice to know that your heirs, your people that are surviving you, are not going to have to probate the property, which is just a big term for a lot of legal court actions that have to happen. If you don't own a property in trust, it has to be probated, meaning you have to figure out who the heirs are, who rightfully gets the property. So the first thing is doing a quitclaim deed and putting it into a living trust. Now, some people will purchase title insurance when that happens. Some people will not. There are advantages to doing that. But there's a big caveat, and that is for about the last 25 years, at least in California, if you have bought residential property and you were an owner-occupied individual or entity buying the property, you probably got what's called a Alta homeowners policy. And so what's great about that title insurance policy is if you take title as an individual, not in your trust or some other individual entity, and you put it and do a quitclaim into your trust, you automatically have title insurance coverage that extends with that. So that's nice because the title policy is going to protect you for any fraud that might take place in your property, any easement or encroachment issues with your neighbors, a lot of things that covers. But you know, your first question about living trust, I'm a big fan of them. I think you should do a deed that takes your property and put it into your living trust, and there's a lot of benefits for that.
Okay, so Brad, I'll play devil's advocate here for a second. So I'm tight. I'm retired. I don't have a lot of money to throw at an attorney. There's other ways to get a living trust besides going into an attorney, correct?
Yeah, there's online companies that they have sort of a template type of living trust that you can use to sort of fill in the blanks, and that's one way to do it. Sure.
So I know I do quite a bit of reverse mortgage business, and I know with a reverse mortgage is when you get into a reverse mortgage, you need to decide whether you're going to own the title in trust or individually. If you own it individually, you can't transfer it into a trust, and vice versa. So on a reverse mortgage, once you choose how you're going to title it, it stays that way for the duration. So it definitely is something to consider if you're thinking about possibly a reverse mortgage down the road, to maybe think about the trust. And of course, reach out to Brad or myself, and we can answer any questions anytime that you have an opportunity. But yeah, the online stuff may not be as good as having an attorney do it. However, it's better than nothing, as they say, right? And it's less expensive. Another thing is when that we see a lot in the mortgage business is when people refinance, sometimes they will assume that the lender automatically puts their property or titles the property in trust or takes it out of the trust and puts it back in automatically. That is not automatic. You need to make sure that's happening. Why go through the trouble of having a trust if you don't put anything in it? So
yeah, that's a really that happens a lot, and I see that. You and I both see that because we're in that world, and in some cases, my understanding is lenders would require someone, if they own it individually, to take it or in a trust. They have to take it out of the trust to refi, and then the lender or the escrow company may or may not put it back in. The good news is that's not a really hard process to complete if you need to do that. One, I would just make sure if you're doing a refinance to verify when everything's done to find out and confirm, is the property put back into your trust if it needs to be back in your trust. If not, there are document prep companies that will do that for you. They will help you create the deed that puts it back in your trust. They'll help you get it notarized, and then they'll actually record it for you. So there is a solution if your property, for some reason, is taken out of the trust and needs to be put back in.
So everybody listening to this podcast should immediately see how their property is titled, and they could probably figure that out through the county recorder's office, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's you can go online at these, like for instance, in San Diego, the San Diego County Assessor Clerk Recorder. You can go online and research documents on the property and find out just exactly what the most current deed of ownership is showing, and then that verifies whether or not it's in the trust.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, that would be it's something anybody listening, I would strongly suggest that if you've refinanced your property since you've had a trust made, or if you're doing it now, make sure that the property gets titled back into the trust. It's very important.
Yeah.
So here's a question from me that I've been scratching my head. So tell me about this company. And I don't know if it's the name of a company or it's just the marketing, but Home Title Lock, what are they all about? Can somebody really take control of my home without me knowing about it?
The answer is yes. There's a lot of bad actors. There's a lot of fraud that's in the last 5 or 10 years. The fraud has increased tremendously. And those types of things where someone is impersonating your identity or just fraudulently recording documents, taking title from you to put it into them. So Home Title Lock is a company, it's a monthly subscription, and they're basically monitoring the county recorder's office on your property, and they will notify you if there's any kind of deed recorded on the property. They're definitely their target audience are boomers, people that are older that typically own property. Their marketing tactics are a little bit fear-based. Hey, don't let someone steal your property. And I understand that. The good news here in San Diego, there's a system in place already that's free. The San Diego County Assessor about 3 years ago, they have their own owner alert. It's called Owner Alert or Owner Fraud Alert, where free of charge, you can just go online with the San Diego County Assessor and sign up for the service. You just put in your information, your property address, your assessor's parcel number, and then they monitor your title for free. And if anything records on your title, they automatically email you instantly saying, hey, this happened. I actually have it on my house, and they've actually sent me emails when something's recorded, and it was something I wanted to record. But so the title home lock there, it's a great idea because you should be monitoring. You don't necessarily have to pay a service, the $20 a month. You can, in San Diego, at least, you can have the county assessor do that for you, and they'll monitor up to 8 properties for you. So if you own multiple properties, you can do that. So it is smart to do that because there are bad people out there that are, in some cases, trying to scam and take advantage of you and trying to hope that you're looking the other way, and then they record a document and try to either do a loan against your property or literally try to sell the property out from underneath you. So it's important to be aware of that.
Okay, so just to repeat, they go to what site?
So just go to the San Diego County Assessor, just Google that, and you can even put owner alert or fraud alert, and that page will come right up, and you just right in there, you can sign up for free, and then they start monitoring your property for any recorded deeds on your property.
Wow, that's great information to have. And again, anybody on this listening to this podcast should take note and get this done. Don't have it be something you put off, because when we put things off, we tend to forget about them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What else? So what else you want to talk about? So go ahead, you come up with something.
Well, one of the things we were emailing back and forth on is, people that are boomers like ourselves that are you have grown children, and oftentimes you want to maybe say, hey, I want to add, my kids on the title, just for obvious reasons. Hey, they're going to get this property at some point, so I just want to add them to title. So, a couple thoughts on that. First of all, if you create a living trust, which is what we talked about previously, and name your children as beneficiaries, and one or more of those people will need to be successor trustees, but ultimately they're beneficiaries, and your property is held in a trust because you've transferred the title into trust. The trust spells out exactly what needs to happen, and so you don't really have to add your children on title. So many people are like, I got to add, John and Susie on title. I want to do a quitclaim deed, but if you have a trust, you don't really need to do that. So, but if you don't have a trust and you want to add them on title, that's great. You absolutely can do that. As I mentioned before, there are doc prep companies that will help you do all that. There's some benefits for sure, and that is that your children now are on title, and the idea is that at some point you want them to have the property. So when you pass away, that would happen. If it's not in a trust, you might have to probate it. You just got to be careful. So there's a lot of benefits to that. Another thing that comes up related to that is will my property be reassessed if I add
Yeah.
my children to title?
Big question.
Um,
Yeah.
So the good news is in California, there's something called a parent-child exclusion. When you record a deed that's adding children or just passing the property to your children, and that basically says if that's the case, they're not allowed to reassess your property at a higher, today's current value, which of course would raise your property taxes. If you've owned your property 30, 40, 50 years, you've got a very low tax base. And so the good news is adding your children or when you adding them or just giving them the property, parent-child exclusion, there's no reassessment. So that's another benefit as well. If you're adding your children to title, now there's one or more people on title. So making decisions on that property, like if you want to refinance or sell, you just got to remember that now you've got to consult with more people. So if the property is not in a trust and you're your husband and wife and you have 2 children, you add them, now there's 4 people that are involved in any decision making on that property, whether it's refinancing or selling. So just understand that. That's why I like a trust, because the only time they get involved is when you pass away and they're now the beneficiaries, then they can make their decisions. They're still going to get the property. So there's a lot of great reasons to add your kids. It's more of how you do that and sort of what that means going forward.
So the negative there would be having
loss of control.
Loss of control, yeah.
Because you're adding now more people in the mix. And if my wife and I have owned my property for 30 years, and yeah, I want my kids to get the property, but if I put my kids on title, I get it. But now we all have to make decisions together, and you sort of lose control as the original people that own the property.
Wouldn't there be a challenge there with litigation as well? Someone gets into a car accident, it's not insured, or
yes,
or something like that, where there could be consequence there as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if one of the parties, let's say you have 3 kids and you had 3 kids on title, and there's a car accident and they have a big lawsuit and a big judgment against them, that could potentially attach, because they own or part owner of the property, that could attach to the property. And now you've got this money judgment or some type of court judgment or lien or monetary lien now that's associated with that property. And now if you want to do something with that property, you might have to deal with that. Meaning if somebody in the mix of ownership has this issue and this judgment, and you go to sell a property, that has to be cured before we can deliver clear title to a new buyer. So yeah, that's another really good reason to be just very thoughtful about adding children to the title.
I imagine there's some different, getting any kind of financial aid and different things where they look at overall assets. That could be another negative as well.
Yeah, it's really any entity. If your children are now on title, that's an asset, and any type of entity or business or court judgment or civil judgment that affects one of those owners, it just becomes an issue you've got to deal with.
Mm-hmm. And it's never a good thing to add, in my opinion, it's never a good thing to add the in-law, right? Even though your daughter has a great marriage to this guy, if they're on title and all of a sudden there's a divorce there, that could cause a challenge. I mean,
no,
anything can happen,
absolutely.
right?
It's of course everybody means well, but when you're actually adding people to the title of a property, it's just an asset that it's in jeopardy when things go bad, basically.
Yeah. So in essence, you've worked really, really hard for your property. Be very, very careful with your choices you make about that property to make sure you maintain it to be yours and not a bunch of other people's.
Yeah, I think so. And it kind of goes back to what we first started talking about. That's a living trust or a revocable living trust. Those are a great vehicle that's, to me, gives you the total control. Your heirs and beneficiaries are still going to get that asset, but you're not also going to get affected with more people in the mix with your life and your piece of real estate.
You pretty much get all the negative, not much of the positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
all the positive, not much of the negative, and maybe it cost you a few bucks, but it might be well worth it. What
Totally.
else can you tell us about title things, and stuff in your world that might affect boomers that are listening to our podcast?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about it, but I'd say the biggest one is just I'm a big fan of, like, if you can avoid probate. Hey, we all have limited time on this earth, and so at some point, as we pass away, you know, if the property is held in a trust, that's a monumental amount of money and time you're going to save by the fact that you put it into a trust and it doesn't have to go to probate. Probates in San Diego right now are taking 2-3 years in some cases. And so, and there's financial cost and burden.
I was going to say, it's not like the county recorder says, well, you don't have to worry about paying us taxes because you're in probate right now, right? All the bills still continue.
Yeah, yeah. And just the attorney fees to probate it and things like that. So I would just say, the top couple issues right now, I would say, with if you're a boomer, is just make sure you avoid probate, which is just, I recommend at least considering a revocable trust. We talked a little bit about just the identity theft and the fraud, and there's an easy way to prevent that by having the the owner alert. One thing I want to mention is, I mentioned before that most people, if they bought their property in the last, say, 25 years, they've got this Alta homeowners policy.
Mhm.
And so if for some reason somebody did record a fraudulent deed trying to steal the title from you, or they tried to, or actually were able to put some kind of loan on your property without your knowledge, a title policy will cover you for that. And it's called post-policy coverage, and that newer policy, the Alta homeowners, provides protection against really fraud is the biggest thing. And so our job as a title insurance company, if that were to happen, you would reach out to your title company, say, hey, this happened. How can you help me? We do an investigation. And if we determine that, yes, in fact, there's been fraud, then basically our policy, we go fight the bad guys. We go figure out legally how to get that property back to you, or how to make that loan go away that somebody did. And that's our job as a title insurance company. You pay one-time premium for that, and then we step in and make sure that that happens. One thing I should mention, because identity owner impersonation is really a big thing right now. In the last couple of years, it's a really big thing. And really what happens is the bad people will actually call real estate professionals and say, hey, I'm the owner of the property, when they're not. I want you to list the property. It's a non-owner occupied. I don't live in it. Let's list it 10% below market. I just want a really fast sell. Let's try to close it quickly. I have my own notary. They also never show up in public. They never do a FaceTime. They never show themselves to the agents. And agents are, and title and escrow companies are really at risk of this, and as the owner is. So that happens literally every day. So we're being very, very diligent about when we have transactions now, we are actually confirming the actual identity of the seller and the buyer, especially the seller, because we want to make sure this seller really does want to sell the property. It's not some fraudster that's impersonating owners. And in Southern California, with all the Chicago titles, we do a lot of business. Several times every week, this is coming up. So
wow,
so the fraud alert, whether it's through the assessor, and then you've got the industry now is we're really watching for these things. So that's just another thing, as anybody that owns property, but certainly boomers should keep an eye out for. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
And then really just the other one was just we talked about it, is anytime you are transferring title to the property, make sure you understand that if it's not just going from you to a child, that there could be a reassessment of the property. And so you just want to make sure you're careful there, because if they reassess and there's now higher property taxes, you would have to, just understand that's going to be a bigger financial commitment to you going forward.
So one question in parting here. So I bought my house 25 years ago, and I have this Alta policy, right? But I don't know who my title company is. So, and I have a question or I have a claim or something. How do I find that out? I mean, it's not like I get monthly birthday cards from the title company, right?
Yeah, no, there's a way to find out. So either if you're an owner of a property and you have a copy of your grant deed, it'll have a title company stamp on the upper left-hand corner. It'll say Chicago Title or First American or somebody, and kind of right below there'll be a title order number. So as long as
but I threw all that stuff in a box, and I don't know where that box is, right?
So if they reach out to you, Carl, you're going to reach out to me. I'll research it. I'll get them a copy of the deed. I'll tell them who their title company is and what the title order number was. And then they just need to call the company and say, okay, I have an issue. Or if they don't, they just have the information in case they do.
So what if the title company isn't in existence anymore?
So
because that happens, right?
It does. So in many cases, title companies that went out of business were sort of absorbed by some of the bigger ones, like a Chicago Title. And if they weren't, then the state of California has a fund for those types of claims or issues for a company that went out of business that wasn't absorbed by one of the big, large title insurance companies.
Well, Brad, it's hard for me to say this, but you've made title kind of interesting for the last 20 minutes or so. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your insight, and we appreciate you coming on and giving us your time, and just can't thank you enough.
Hey, my pleasure, Carl. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Take care.
The content of this podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, legal, or professional advice. You should not rely solely on the information presented here to make any decisions. We recommend seeking the guidance of a qualified professional for any specific situation. Arc Latex Financial Services, LLC, NMLS number 2143. Its hosts and guests cannot be held liable for any losses, damages, or other negative consequences arising from your use of the information presented in this podcast. For licensed information, visit www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org. Equal housing opportunity.